AI is sort of this super centralizing intelligence, right? You take all this energy and data and then you bring it all together, and now you have this super intelligent bot that just thinks for you. Whereas a prediction market is kind of decentralizing that, in that it's eliciting all of these reactions from the crowd.
Hello, I am Codyellingham, and this is the Transformation of Value podcast. In this episode, I talk with James Pierog, co-founder and CEO of Bitcoin Prediction Market, a new company backed by Bitcoin startup accelerator Wolf, enabling bets on real-world events using the Bitcoin Lightning Network. We explore what a prediction market is, why Bitcoin is the perfect medium for this, and what new forms of crowd intelligence through prediction markets could mean in an increasingly complex world. Along the way, we discuss the intersection of philosophy and mathematics, the wisdom of the crowd, AI, and the challenge of dealing with rapid change. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out. My emails are always open. hello@thetransformationofvalue.com. Otherwise, on to the show. How have you been, James?
Oh, very good, very good. Since we met in Tokyo, there's been so many changes, so much progress. Recently, I was in Bitcoin Amsterdam and got so much feedback from so many different people. The end result of that was basically we were convinced that going the route of a normal prediction market and offering general predictions to start would be a really good idea. And so far, it's been really exciting. Lots of traction. Yeah, like a few million sats bet so far, which is a lot more than we got with the mining markets, which I'm still incredibly bullish on. The only thing is attracting the liquidity for that is a challenge, whereas elections and other more popular events can attract liquidity pretty quickly. So yeah.
That's incredible. And I feel like we kind of left a half-finished conversation somewhere in the depths of Shinjuku, Tokyo, when we met. And we didn't quite get a chance to finish that. But it sounds like, as you say, you've been working away on Bitcoin Prediction Market. Did you present at Amsterdam, or you were just sort of floating around? Or
Yeah, just floating around. But we talked to a few important people who gave us the inspiration to, really set off on this journey.
That's awesome, man. Well, look, I guess, James, by way of introduction, maybe if you could share just a bit about your background, perhaps, where you grew up, how you came to be working on Bitcoin, if that's okay, please.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up from basically in many locations, Korea, Canada, China. Went to university in Singapore.
Yes.
Went to Yale in US, and that was where Andrew Bailey was teaching.
Yes.
And I was actually his student for my first year philosophy class, and we really kicked it off. It wasn't until my fourth year, though, during COVID, when I was working at this crypto consultancy, looking into research into all these different protocols, and I was reading Andrew Bailey's research on Bitcoin and money without state, and this was right when the peak of state infringement on people's rights was occurring. And I was in Singapore, which was probably one of the most authoritarian reactions to the whole everything. So I thought that money without state was a really good idea, and that was probably the most important thing I should be working on. So after that, after I graduated, I met my co-founder, Ruben, at this startup accelerator, Entrepreneur First. And we raised some money from them and also from Wolf. We were a part of the Genesis cohort of the Wolf Accelerator, and that was super exciting, super inspiring. After that, we iterated through many different startup ideas. We initially started with Lightning node automation because we thought that the barrier to adoption was the technology itself. We realized that it was more so use cases. There needed to be use cases for Bitcoin so that people could find a reason to open a Lightning node or have a Lightning wallet, even a custodial wallet. So after that, we switched to social betting. This was during the Wolf program. We pivoted basically 2 weeks before demo day, and we didn't know what we were going to do at first, but the idea for social betting came up. Then we iterated through a few of those ideas and found our way towards prediction markets and general forecasting. And that seems like what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And something you said, it's about building products for people who use Bitcoin and not necessarily Bitcoiners themselves. And it sort of speaks to a larger conversation, which I think we started having in Tokyo, and certainly many people around the world are starting to think about building, I guess, the velocity of usage of Bitcoin and beyond just a store of value, which I say just a store of value, it's an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, but there is also a whole other piece around medium of exchange and these other aspects of what we think of as money, which are beginning to emerge. I think it's a funny time in the world right now, and this Bitcoin prediction market that you've built is a great example of that, because it helps, I guess, get around a lot of the challenges you might have doing this in the legacy world. It has a dynamism and a speed to it, and I put a bet on there, or I made a prediction, let me say, and it was so easy I could do it in 2 seconds, which I just don't know if there's anything else like that in the fiat world. And so in terms of this Bitcoin prediction market space, is this something that has been explored before on Bitcoin? How did you, I mean, how do you sort of see the existing market for that?
So I think the space for predictions on Bitcoin is very nascent.
Okay.
I think prediction markets in general are just kind of reaching, like the Overton window has shifted enough to where it's relevant in popular consciousness. And I think that is the big driver for why it's the why now kind of question. Basically, yeah, like going back to what you said, like building products for people who have Bitcoin, not just Bitcoiners. That's really the main drive here. I've seen a lot of circular economy stuff and how that works. The one thing I think is that for Bitcoin to get adopted further, there needs to be that order of magnitude improvement on the experience of a payment. And there needs to be something that gives that order of magnitude improvement that people want, right? So going to the coffee shop and ordering coffee with Lightning, that's one use case for Bitcoin, but I don't see it as an order of magnitude improvement, right? Fiat currency, Apple Pay, credit cards, they do that pretty well. But as you said, when placing a bet, right, this is something that has been extraordinarily limited by traditional financial institutions. But because Bitcoin is the censorship resistant money, it's freedom technology, now we're able to have these novel use cases for money. And there's a benefit. There's a net benefit in that all of the information that's aggregated by the participants can forecast the future. And I view it as a kind of transmutation of this urge to gamble towards a aggregation of sentiment. And that's something that hasn't been seen in a widespread implementation. Like I view Polymarket as the first super huge prediction market. And they're able to do that because they're using, Matic, which is a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, and they're using stablecoins on top of that. But Bitcoin is the hardest money ever, and there doesn't exist the kind of poly market for Bitcoin. And that's a novel use case that we think can drive adoption and also create a net benefit for people, in that this is the kind of crystal ball that we can foresee the future through.
Yeah, I want to just pull on that a little bit. The idea of a prediction market more generally as a concept. I mean, how would you, I guess, explain that? And I mean, where, and even in the fiat world, where have we seen these emerge from historically?
So the idea for a prediction market originated from, I believe, Robin Hanson. He created the logarithmic market scoring rule, which is basically a scoring rule that many market participants can use. And a scoring rule essentially rewards experts for their predictions and probabilities of an event occurring. Now, the idea has been around for a really long time, and it's seen lots of academic implementation, corporate implementation, some consumer implementation, mainly with like election bets. but there hasn't been a sort of widespread consumer use that we see with Polymarket today. I know in I think the early 2000s there was Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank. They created these large parimutuel betting markets, which essentially means the winners split the losers' money.
Mm.
And they use these to bet on CPI and interest rates from, believe, banks and other large corporate clients, but they closed that down. Not sure what happened there. Essentially, it's been a an idea that's been around for a while, but now we see that it's possible in a new way, combining the social with the financial in a certain sense.
Yeah, that's it's really fascinating for me because I've really just last night even I met with a friend, a new friend, and I found out he's a Bitcoiner, which is great, and he's deeply involved in the design thinking space and looking at a lot of big topics. So we had this long walking conversation about all of these kinds of things, and what stood out to me is that we're living in a time of great change. Who knows what the fuck is going to happen tomorrow? And it seems as if, whether it's the influence of AI, just the dead internet slop floating around on social media, just a general sense of malaise, it's really hard to get a grip on where the world's heading. And there seems to be some sort of market intelligence that we can fall back on that maybe helps see through some of that when you've got a financial incentive. And I think there's something very interesting about what you're doing with the Bitcoin prediction market, given that it's built upon sound money. It could kind of help give a bit of clarity. And I mean, the example would be with the election. There's so much noise, it's almost impossible to filter out. But when hard money is on the table, you can kind of see clearly what the market intelligence thinks is going to happen. And it seems like that could be quite a powerful resource for the world going forward.
I think so as well. I think there's kind of two order of magnitude things that are changing right now. One is AI, right? And we've seen how crazy that is, right? But AI is sort of this super centralizing intelligence, right? You take all this energy and data and then you bring it all together, and now you have this super intelligent bot that just thinks for you. Whereas a prediction market is kind of decentralizing that in that it's eliciting all of these reactions from the crowd. And basically, everyone gives their opinion, or everyone who participates gives their opinion. And because there's that monetary incentive, there's that risk. Of course, there's something to lose. And if there's something to lose, now you have the incentive to be correct, right? Whereas the AI can just spew some nonsense, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also a reflexive effect, I guess you could say, where in the case of a social phenomena, if enough people are invested in it, the change will happen. And there's this classic problem with polling and elections where it's not right until it's wrong. It's not wrong until it's right, etc. And it just because there's no people say what they think is socially acceptable, and there's no barriers to people saying whatever publicly. And I think this is what caught everyone out with Trump in 2016, is that it was kind of not okay to talk about it, and then it just happened. But with the anonymous nature of these prediction markets and the hard money that's backing it sort of it removes that bias that people might have to mask their questionnaires or their responses at an exit poll, for example, where this is real money is on the table and you can just let the market speak.
Yes, exactly. And hard money is better for that than stable coins, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's only a finite amount of Bitcoin, but you can always print more stable coins, right? So let's say if there was an incentive to manipulate markets, it would be harder to do so with Bitcoin. Of course, this is when it comes to the theoretical limit of how large a prediction market can get when we're at like peak liquidity. If you're doing it with Bitcoin, then I'd say the fact that Bitcoin has this finite supply means that it's more resilient towards the kinds of manipulation that we could see in prediction markets that are using fiat currency. Another interesting point that you made, basically as a market for intelligence, the idea that a prediction market can give you something that you don't already know is, I think, something that's very profound, right? intelligence being something significant that's going to occur in the future. With an AI, all you can see is the past, right? All we know is the data that's been fed into the machine that's trained the AI. But a prediction market is forward looking, right? And we all know that the most difficult thing to make are predictions, especially about the future. But the idea that we can actually get some sort of like new forecasting, a decentralized mechanism for forecasting, uh, can empower a lot of people. Now we can make better decisions, right? How many decisions are made with inaccurate information? I bet tons of money are, at stake when it comes to all sorts of incorrect information and bad forecasting, not just in people's personal lives, but in a company setting. And
Yeah.
yeah, prediction
Yeah.
markets can help with that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I've been going a little bit down this rabbit hole myself. I'm at a point where I'm starting to think about, what is it that I am doing, and what is the next thing. And I've been watching a lot of videos and content from a guy, Rory Sutherland, who is one of the directors at Ogilvy, which is a major advertising company, and he's got some incredible takes on this emphasis on what versus why in the marketplace at the moment. And it's kind of a very data heavy approach, which tends to not see the future. You can look at analytics for a website and it can tell you what happened, but it doesn't necessarily tell you why, and it doesn't necessarily tell you what the next thing will be. It sort of is retroactive and retrospective, and combining that with The Price of Tomorrow, Jeff Booth's book, which I've been working through, there's just this increasing awareness within me that I think we're in this moment right now where the world is changing quite rapidly, and there is a technological evolution and revolution taking place. And the nature of intelligence, the AI, as you say, it's sort of looking into the past, and it's trained on this data, and that data is now getting corrupted by kind of AI slop. It's sort of it's almost as if the antidote to that is the neural network of humans making the forecast into the future. And I just think, man, you, me, and a couple of guys chatting about Bitcoin in Tokyo, there was perhaps more insight there than any AI could come up with. And what if you were to grow that to the entire world, where everyone can put it out there and see what sticks and get an idea for the sentiment of the world? I mean, that sounds like the order of magnitude revolution that you're speaking of, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. AIs, again, they're only trained in the past, and the fact that we now have a mechanism to aggregate sentiment and actually see what people think, right? Before, the idea for prediction markets has been around for a while, but actually implementing it whereby you have many people using it, that's the revolution that's actually occurring, right?
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things I wanted to drill into. So in terms of the technical side, I know you guys are still working through, this is kind of early days, but in terms of the nature of Bitcoin, it's highly auditable on chain at least. And I know you guys are using Lightning, but in terms of, I guess, the clarity, the transparency of what you're doing compared to, say, legacy prediction markets, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the vision that we want to go for, that we're gunning for, is potentially having a prediction market on like a layer two, maybe rootstock or liquid, having it just be a smart contract that's running on one of their blockchains. However, in the meantime, while we're just building, iterating, and testing the market, seeing what sticks, we're using Lightning. And all of the transactions currently are auditable. If you make a bet, then you can scroll down and see all of the people who also made a bet and what their position was. Now, if you know someone's Lightning address, that is a privacy leak. So what we've been thinking about is potentially using eCash as a mechanism by which people can save their shares and then redeem them later or sell them before the market ends. Basically, the way that would work is for every share that you purchase, you get an eCash token, and that token, you can save that on your computer or you can save it in an eCash wallet, let's say. And when you want to sell that share, then you would just upload that token and enter in your receive address, and then you could receive it. You don't need to list that receive address after you make the payment, essentially. So it decouples the identity of the predictor from the bet itself, which is a potential order of magnitude improvement over something like Polymarket, whereby with Polymarket, for example, all bets are attached to an identity, right? They're connected to your account. And there's no way to bet without having an account. We currently don't have accounts. So if you place a bet, you can just make any sort of Lightning address that you can, as long as you own that Lightning address, you can receive it. So you make a bet with one wallet, receive to another, uh, and then you have some more privacy. And if we're dealing with betting on potentially controversial topics where people might not want to expose their opinions, this could provide a lot of value.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess in terms of the mechanism for the prediction market, I guess what would you call it, closing the prediction round? I mean, who decides in the case of a prediction, and how is that done on your guys' side, or how do you want to see it be done?
Well, right now, the product is fully custodial. It's our MVP, and we're currently the Oracle. So we only
You are the
create,
Oracle?
yeah,
Yeah,
we're the Oracle.
yeah.
So any sort of market, we need to be sure that we can verify the outcome before we list it.
Mm.
And we're only listing markets that we have a pretty good idea about. In the future, when it comes to, let's say, adding more markets, then we've looked into a lot of research around decentralized Oracle networks and seeing if it's possible to have some sort of reputation-based system whereby people can run their own Oracle and get rewarded for providing attestations on different events. There's some research into DLCs that we looked into as well. There's multiple Oracle models where people can settle DLC contracts with like a decentralized network of oracles. And that was fascinating. We looked into how to do a prediction market with DLCs as well. We wrote up a little paper on that, and it was interesting research, but the only difficulty is DLCs have an incredibly hefty build time. They're complex, and the user experience is rather a lot less as good in terms of like compared to, let's say, Lightning and eCash, for example.
Mm.
There's also really high liquidity requirements for DLCs, which is a problem. If we want to grow and expand, having a Lightning-based model is really nice. Same goes for, let's say, sidechains. But with DLCs, basically every bet that someone in the market makes, the market maker, who's the counterparty, would need to match that bet.
Yeah.
And
Could
yeah.
you expand? So what does DLC stand for?
DLCs are discrete log contracts,
Okay.
and they're a way to do Bitcoin smart contracts natively on layer one. They were proposed by Taj Drija. He's a super smart guy. I actually also talked to him in Tokyo about different kind of Bitcoin predictions and mining predictions, mining betting. But essentially what a DLC is a two of two multisig transaction where Alice and Bob can commit funds to that two of two multisig, and they pre-sign all of the transaction outputs such that when an oracle releases that signature, when it attests to an outcome, then Alice or Bob can take that signature and unlock their funds, and they don't need to trust their counterparty. They only need to trust the oracle. So DLCs, you can make a simple election bet, for example, with two outcomes. Who will win the election, Kamala or Trump? Lock some Bitcoin in that and have an oracle attest to that outcome. It's not too difficult. The challenge is when you want to create a prediction market where you're using something like the logarithmic market scoring rule to basically create shares which have a price, and that price is the probability of an outcome occurring. That's when things get really challenging with DLCs.
Yeah.
With Lightning, with eCash, much easier. With something like a Liquid or a Rootstock, definitely like it's an order of magnitude more difficult, but it's a lot easier than DLCs, which is, of course, the most native way to do smart contracting on Bitcoin, but also one of the most challenging.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, if we take the Trump versus Harris example, something that's stuck out to me is some of the edge cases that are possible. And so I wonder if we could maybe just dwell on that in terms of something like there being no election, or there being a civil unrest, or whatever. That means that there is no clear outcome that can be attested to, and things like this, where it's not a clear Boolean outcome. It's sort of something messy in the middle. How does stuff like that work from your perspective?
So basically, if there's a conflict and things are unclear, then we do nothing until things become more clear. The way Polymarket does it, which is what we look towards, was basically they resolve the prediction after the election has been finalized and multiple media outlets are reporting on the results. If there's a conflict, though, they wait until the next inauguration, which is in January.
Yeah. Is it possible to void? Is that a state that can exist where the entire prediction is voided and funds are returned?
Oh, well, that's always possible.
I see.
Yeah.
So if there was something, for example, the United States is no longer a country and there's no more elections or something like that, or any case where the Boolean doesn't exist, you can have a proviso for voiding the prediction and people don't lose any funds on that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Of course.
excellent. And I guess that's very interesting to me, because maybe some of the examples are kind of like yes/no examples, but with some of these predictions, would you imagine there's a need for, I guess, rules or parameters for exactly what is being described as the prediction? So we're not talking about the 2028 election. Clearly, we're talking about the 2024 election. I mean, how does Polymarket do this? Is that kind of common practice to have provisos exactly describing what you're predicting on?
Yeah, it's common and it's also necessary. If
Yeah.
we don't describe precisely what the event is that occurs, yeah, things can get messy and manipulation could occur, which is not in our best interest. We would much prefer everyone understand very clearly what the actual event is that we're betting on, and that way we can aggregate the most, accurate forecasts.
Yeah, because I mean, this is, I guess, where sort of soft, malleable human institutions fail in the face of mathematics. What defines a war? What defines an election? These kinds of things can be messy. But I think maybe this is where clearly outlined provisions for what is exactly in the prediction are important, and then also that role of the oracles, as you say. And it feels like it's quite a lot to take on, building the prediction market and the oracle side. I think, I look forward to seeing how that emerges. I mean, in terms of this kind of concept of an oracle, though, is that something that's already out there being used? Is Polymarket making use of these kind of decentralized oracle systems, or?
So I haven't investigated too much into Polymarket's Oracle network. What I know is inherently in any sort of Oracle network, there's always that layer of trust, right? So there needs to be some sort of relationship between the people who are betting and the Oracle that is attesting. And for us, since we're super early, just releasing our MVP, we're the Oracle, and if we screw up, then we lose trust in from the community, and that's bad for our growth. So we are aligned in that we want to attest correctly. The trouble begins when, let's say, we open it up to a network of decentralized oracles, and we want to create something like a censorship-resistant prediction market where people can oracles can list events that they're going to attest to, and people can make predictions on that. Then it's a matter of incentives and how do you reward oracles for correctly attesting to outcomes. We still haven't solved that, and I think some more research needs to be done on innovative solutions in that regard, especially for Bitcoin native prediction markets.
Yeah, no, and certainly I fully appreciate it's early days, man. I mean, I can certainly see the potential and the talent that you guys have. So that's why I'm kind of forecasting it myself into the future. But I guess where my concern comes from is with the just proliferation of language learning models and generative AI and all of this stuff. it comes down to a fundamental epistemology of like what is reality, what is truth, what even happened, because it's kind of already pretty tough, man, to ascertain. And even if you do, it's like, well, clearly we can't trust mainstream media with reporting on the truth. And so we get into some sort of icky territory around what is the nature of reality. And this is where I wonder if there's not an incredible opportunity here, because you not only studied mathematics and computer science, but also philosophy. So you've got the trifecta of a Bitcoiner there. So I guess maybe sort of pivoting into the philosophy side of things. I mean, how do you see that relating to these ideas of truth, predicting the future, and kind of all of that?
Yeah, so I feel like one of the big things why election markets are the most common thing is because it's a thing that people can agree on what's going to happen, right? When it comes to the truth more generally, I feel like I really like Ingo Swann's description of it in his book Reality Boxes, in which he goes over how people have this kind of mindset, which is a reality framework that programs their consciousness into basically the way that information enters, it becomes formatted in the mind, and then the mind reacts based on the subconscious formatting of it. So when it comes to, let's say, AIs, for example, people can ask an AI a question, let's say about empowerment. They want to figure out a way to gain more power. They want to figure out a way to understand something more deeply, something that, let's say, people who have a lot of power don't want them to, right? Then the AI deflects, right? It doesn't actually tell you what the real substance is. It's a tool that's made by people who have backers with very powerful interests, and they don't want you to actually know the truth. They can give you something mundane, right? Like, let's say, a cooking recipe or a way to like fix your house, but they're not going to tell you the kind of big truths that might be hidden from view. And some of these big truths might be hidden from view from people themselves, right? They might not want to know the truth because it scares them, right? I've talked to a lot of friends who simply don't want to investigate any sort of quote unquote conspiracy theory just because it would break their reality, because they would need to find some new bedrock basis of understanding to ground themselves in, because their current reality is basically a bunch of thoughts. And these thoughts have been taught to them by institutions like schools, universities, media, and these thoughts are what ground them in their reality, not the, let's say, the current moment that they live in and the evidence that they're seeing and the other ideas that they, let's say, would reject. And it requires courage and humility to go down that path of actually uncovering what the truth may be, even if it's scary and even if it's very difficult to digest. And that's what a lot of I see AI safety as trying to prevent people from understanding this, right? You want to keep people safe in their reality box and be comfortable rather than know the truth and be possibly frightened by it.
Yeah, I mean, just looking here at Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow, he says, we notice things that match our view and we dismiss things that do not. And he's got a whole chapter dedicated to thinking differently and how hard it is to think differently. And this has certainly been my obsession for the last couple of years, really, is sort of seeing this increasingly divided world where there's sort of the the classic blue pill, red pill, I guess you could say, but understanding that everything is changing. And there is a comfort in unchanging reality and a day-to-day routine, but every day we're seeing things pivot and just gyrate in such an increasing frequency that I don't know how much longer that's a viable strategy. And so you sort of become faced with the great void of an unknown future, and all of your models get broken. And so maybe this is coming back to the work then you're doing again with the foundational philosophy of sound money and Bitcoin at its core. You know, is there almost a new kind of information revolution that is possible through something like a Bitcoin prediction market that helps us make sense of the world, helps us kind of get a gauge for what is going on? And perhaps even the idea that maybe the oracles themselves have some sort of vested interest to tell the truth. I'm not quite sure what the mechanism for that would be, but it's sort of it kind of helps fix this just late stage project where everything seems to be crazy. I mean, they call it clown world for a reason, but putting money on the table, I wonder if that doesn't take us back to a more balanced keel and a more truthful kind of way of being, perhaps.
Yeah, I find it fascinating looking at the results of the prediction market,
Yeah.
seeing all the bets come in and seeing what people actually believe, and then seeing how large those bets are correlating to the strength of their belief. However, I think there is a limit to prediction markets when it comes to, let's say, uncovering the truth, which is prediction markets are really great where you can specify an event that's going to occur in the future, and you can get many people together to view it and to bet on it, and they have many different beliefs. Whereas lots of what actually happens is hidden, I feel, and there's this secret power that's at work. And secret because, uh, well, the most powerful form of power is secret power because most people don't even know it's there, right? And if you think about what large events have affected the world and how those decisions were made, mostly behind closed doors, and mostly at first it's an idea in someone's head, and then it gets translated into a manifestation that occurs in reality, right? So if we look at Germany's energy prices, right, we could possibly bet on that, but how could we have bet on the Nord Stream pipeline getting blown up, right? That is just, it was just a total surprise. But if we see like the correlation between, let's say, the Nord Stream pipeline getting blown up and now Germany's has increased energy prices, nuclear power plants getting demolished, shut down, then there becomes to, you can see kind of what's going on, but then maybe you might not be able to predict what happens next. It's
Mm.
it's tough to phrase what those predictions might be, and I feel like that's one of the big challenges that maybe could be overcome with, let's say, oracles who have this privileged access to knowledge. If they, let's say, want to report on these events and they have privileged access, but they don't want to reveal their identity because it might actually cause harm to themselves or their family or their work or whatever, then maybe there might be a way to structure the incentives in such a way where that's possible. But at the end, it might also be that much of what happens remains secret. And prediction markets are great for betting on large things, but uh, the small things that end up subverting what we thought would happen might not be even known to us in the general consciousness of the population, right?
Yeah. I wonder if there's almost a decentralization here of how would you say the directionality of society, because you talk about these kind of closed doors, and in a sense there is a there is a market there behind closed doors, whether it's lobbying or the political military industrial complex, whatever you know rabbit hole you want to go down. There's clearly some forces at play that are having conversations around tables that we are not privy to. However, with this kind of massive radical decentralization of that through something like a global decision market, global prediction market, we sort of can get a read on what's happening. And when it's coming to some fundamentals around elections or interest rates or whatever the big things are, we sort of we bring that we drag that out of those closed rooms into the public eye. And I don't quite have the language to describe it, but it feels as if it's in line with say the interest rates and the price of money that is currently set by like a couple of guys,
Yes.
behind a door. It's like choosing the Pope. Do we get the white smoke or the black smoke? Whereas this just drags it out into the street, and everyone can participate. And at any level, you can make a 500 sat bet, or you can make a 5 Bitcoin bet. It doesn't really matter. And so there's sort of a something there which I don't quite know, but it feels quite quite radical. I can feel it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like the universe is giving one kernel at a time of this wisdom that is leading us on this path of, let's say, breadcrumbs towards what that future might eventually be, right? Without Polymarket's success, we wouldn't have gotten inspired to create this prediction market. And uh, who knows what might the ramifications be after we launch and we do a bunch of things, and maybe the popular consciousness can shift towards putting the attention and focus on some of the more critical uh, decisions and events that affect a large portion of the population.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I've sort of been feeling, just kind of more from my creative side, is this kind of postmodern malaise, with no real sense of the grand narrative that we once had. Maybe every now and then you get glimpses of it with stuff like what SpaceX is doing. You get a sense like, yeah, this is quite a profound thing that needs to happen. Interplanetary travel, kind of the larger projects of humanity, which once upon a time felt maybe a bit more day to day. We had that in front of us. We're going to put men on the moon, or we're going to travel to the other side of the world, etc. And today it feels very fragmented and atomized, and I'm not sure if that's just a function of the late stage project, or whether it's kind of done on purpose. But it seems everyone's just kind of on their own little trajectory, and there's a network effect that's kind of like hurting them, and there's algorithms that are kind of magically moving them around. But there's not really that sense that everyone's aligned like, shards of iron with a magnet running beneath. And I wonder if there isn't something within all of this, and this is getting a bit esoteric, but something that could help align, I guess, a bigger vision, a bigger idea for humanity, something maybe a little bit more beyond our day to day, which it seems like our attention spans have gotten down to about 4 seconds at this point. And so the concept of putting somebody on to another planet or traveling, beyond Earth, it's quite distant compared to where it once was. So, I mean, maybe going out on a limb, James, but how do you see that just more broadly?
Well, I see, let's say, if we start with Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin being this neutral framework of rules that enable cooperation without vulnerability. If we take Bitcoin as that this new monetary paradigm that enables debt credit settlement with this bearer token that's connected to energy, then it's neutral, right? And so I'd say this killer app that Bitcoin needs to proliferate would be something like a prediction market, where you can have this alignment of this neutral technology, this neutral money, with a neutral social layer that enables people to disagree with the neutral money, right? And this disagreement forms consensus. And of course, it's rough consensus, right? We don't know for sure 0 or 100% whether an event is going to happen. It's only 1 to 99%. But this kind of rough consensus is a lot better than, let's say, the legacy media institutions that feed us misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, narratives and stories, rather than us just looking at what's happening and placing our money there.
Yeah, it's as if we're removing this filter that's been in the way. I feel like, it's kind of hard to even use language to describe, but the kind of fog of war, the fog of media that is descending and it's sort of encroaching everywhere. It feels like Bitcoin kind of blasts through that, and there's this kind of sense of truth to it. It's grounded in reality. From the very beginning, it requires real electricity. You can't fake it. There's no shortcut. And building upon that foundation, I've always felt, sort of intuitively, that there's something there that's quite profound when you compare it with, say, the fiat system, which is kind of magical handshakes and behind closed doors, and just everything about it from the bottom is kind of broken. And so from that foundation, great things can be built. And it's hard to sort of say exactly where it's going, but it just feels quite positive. But it is a little bit daunting, to be fair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
One thing that it reminds me of, the connection of Bitcoin to energy, is in my 4th year at university, right when I was getting super orange pilled, I was also in this class on financial bubbles and crises,
Mm.
and in it I was reading this text, Thermoeconomics by Friedrich Soddy, who's a Nobel Prize winning chemist.
Yes.
And I think we might have talked about this in Tokyo,
Yes.
but Friedrich Soddy, he proposed that we need a monetary system that's connected to energy because that would be thermodynamically aligned with the nature of reality, as everything that is physical and created abides by the law of entropy and it eventually is destroyed, right? Uh, as entropy increases, the chaos increases, right? And so we look at that in economics, and that's just depreciation, right? You have a house that's built, and then the weather and other just use, it makes it of a lower value, right? And you need to put in some energy to restore that value. Now, Friedrich Soddy was very critical of the debt-based monetary paradigm that existed at the time and also exists today. And he saw the fact that interest was compounding exponentially as a threat to the monetary paradigm, whereby everyone would eventually be swallowed up by the debt, right? Which is basically what's been happening till today. And one interesting thought that I can connect that to is from David Graeber's book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And the first use of the word freedom in text that we could find was in this cuneiform tablet, which it was from, I believe, Mesopotamia. And in it was this word aini, which means return to the mother. And it's the emperor, the king, used it at the time because everyone was entrapped in debt slavery and no one could return back to their families. So what did they do? They broke the slates, they cleaned the slates, which were the records of the debts, and they allowed people to return back to their families. So when we talk about freedom technology, when we talk about what freedom is, well, if we go back to the essence of what freedom has been for thousands of years, right? The first use of the term, it's freedom from the debts, right? And Bitcoin offers that with the new monetary paradigm, right? Where you have energy-based money that isn't connected to any sort of debts that we have accumulated in the past.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Coming back to Frederick Soddy, I know was a very cross-disciplinary scientist, and he worked with Ernest Rutherford, actually, a fellow New Zealander from the old days who split the atom, and he was Nobel laureate, and he had this very interesting approach, an example of a man of science who didn't limit himself to a single field of knowledge. And so similar to yourself, bringing together mathematics, philosophy, and computer science, there was this kind of new interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary way of engaging with reality. And it sort of takes us out of maybe our narrow perspectives, our narrow scope, and lets us sort of look over everything. And then responding to your thoughts around that kind of clearing the slates and the kind of the debt jubilee, which historically was quite common in many societies. We talk about Schumpeter's creative destruction in the market, which clearly, whether it's the 2008 financial crisis or bank bailouts, it's kind of once you begin down the path of intervening with these kinds of things, the market will assume that intervention will happen again and again. And so you remove that function of creative destruction, which also in a way removes creative creation. And so things don't really come out anymore. And so you get these kind of perverse malaise-like kind of broken systems that don't really feel like they're responding to reality in the way we would expect.
What I find fascinating is whenever we have this is from David Graeber.
Yes.
Is many revolutions, or pretty much most revolutions that have occurred, they wanted two things. They wanted to redistribute the land, and they wanted to clear the debts. And what was fascinating to me was how in many of these communist revolutions throughout, let's say, in Nepal or in Indonesia or the attempted ones in, let's say, Philippines or elsewhere, you have people who want to redistribute the land and cancel the debts because effectively they're operating as like a slave society, and the slaves are kind of fed up, right? And so they
Mm,
gather their guns and they want to get something done differently. And
mm,
I think fundamentally, if uh, power centralizes, right, and us people, as let's say, if we think of ourselves as like a power species, right, as we're not just meant to eat and sleep and work, but there's higher orders of magnitude, things that are meant for us in this life. And if we have this power of creative energy that we can use to basically affect reality, then that creative energy can also be used to control reality, right? And so, people as a power species, if we think about the most important resource as power over others, then these revolutions are kind of revolutions of power, right? Uh, when you have a system of debts that has basically created an elite and then a slave class, essentially, then what you have is those guys succeeded and they got all the power and they control this huge population. But with the people who are, let's say, disaffected, who have no power or agency of their own, let's say economic or financial, or they don't have the educational resources to know what to think, or they're programmed by, let's say, institutions or media, and they don't have access to resources, or they're held down by violence or force, then that system of inequality leads to, I think, that malaise that you're talking about, right? That kind of disenchantment where people feel like they can't do anything. Whereas now it seems like there's kind of this trajectory of the cosmos in which this fragmentation, people are kind of almost realizing that there's more, right? There's more than just being entrapped in the systems that bound them to the past. They can actually create new systems. And I feel like Bitcoin is one of those paradigm changing inventions that people are latching on to reflect this idea. But also there's many other ideas, right? There's prediction markets. There's so many different let's say even in AI, right? As like an empowerment technology. Initially, using ChatGPT, it was able to tell you all sorts of different facts that Wikipedia would not tell you, or that the news agencies would not tell you, or the schools would not tell you. But very quickly that got covered up, right? They have the data and they were able to use it to train this super intelligent model that was able to communicate as basically a teacher.
mm,
But then they began to control that teacher. And now you can't ask it the real questions where some secrets might be revealed, right? You're only
mm.
given the programmed response that keeps you safe in the reality box that they want you in, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, just responding to that idea of the secrets, I'm quite interested in the early Christian Gnostic movement and this kind of idea of esoteric knowledge possessed by a few, and sort of how that, in a way, is kind of anti. I don't know if it's anti-human, but it's sort of, it puts it into a certain box and it isolates it from general consumption, and we sort of are seeing that play out now, where we've got just this massive class. Most people, basically, popular culture is this hegemonic negotiation where we have a little bit of sway here and there, but for the most part, it feels like it is top down, sort of like, they can kind of herd things a little bit along the way. But there's something about the broader Bitcoin revolution, which I struggle to sometimes talk to people about because it's a big idea, but it feels, as you describe, quite emancipatory. And I'm reminded of, you talk about this kind of debt and kind of slavery and the wage slavery that we all know, but, a lot of land reforms that took place in places like Japan, even after World War II, which sort of set to break up some of the aristocracy and kind of redistribute it in a way that wasn't really explicitly communist. It was, led by the Americans, but that kind of enabled Japan's industrial revolution to take place the second time after the war. There's a really good book that Joe Studwell wrote about how the Asian countries that were able to do land reform successfully after the war were the ones that became, rich, and the ones that didn't do it very well were the ones that became poor, because you kind of enabled the individual to have the small lot the classic market gardener stereotype that we have. There's a reason that that's a very industrious and conscientious stereotype. It's because they were able to, I guess, take ownership of that plot of land and work on it for their own good, as opposed to being a serf. And places like Malaysia, the Philippines, that didn't have that same level of revolution, or I guess not revolution, land reform, that they sort of have lingered, and they're still developed countries, but they sort of struggle with some of that inequality that we speak of. So there's something about emancipating the people, which it can feel like it's got some socialist undertones, but I think there's something deeper in there that kind of enables the node to activate and be a full participant and not just a watch-only kind of light client. You know what I mean? It's sort of using some Bitcoin terminology, but they become self-sovereign and they kind of take ownership of it, right?
Exactly. Same thing happened in Korea with, it was actually funny. The North Korean, after the Japan left Korea, then it was the North that was the one that redistributed all of the land. And the South kept those land reforms, which is why Korea is in large part food secure, right? You have all these small independent farms that are able to produce the food that people eat and people sell. It's not relying on external imports, let's say. And many Koreans, even though even if they might be economically poor, they're still rich in terms of resources. There's food on the table, and there's no sort of starvation. There's water that's plentiful. And when you have those basic ingredients of life, then it's possible to build from there, right? So I see Bitcoin as the next piece of that puzzle, right? If you have land, if you have food, if you have water to drink, you have the components of life. Now you want to be able to interact with others in an economic fashion. Now you need self-sovereign money, right? And that next piece of the puzzle is what can allow, a dramatic shift in terms of, broadband history, let's say. Maybe not instantaneously, it's not going to be seen, but let's say the historians in 50, 100 years, they'll be like, okay, yeah, this was a real revolution.
Yeah, there's something profound about a comparative study between land reforms and financial reforms powered by Bitcoin. I think there's something there, James. It's like you give a man a fish, or you teach him how to fish. And there's something here about running your own node, running your own systems, being self-sovereign in that sense, which is very, very aligned with having a small plot of land and being a market gardener and having the ability to invest in your property and your private property and improve it and create returns and then take that to market, which, and there's many kind of conflicting powers at play here, but, with increasing centralization and arguably government-led corporatization, I don't know what we call this kind of big tech, etc., kind of getting in the way. You've got maybe what was aristocratic ownership of large amounts of land prior to World War II. Is that similar to the ownership of data by big tech? And we're going to see maybe some sort of revolution, whether it's Bitcoin, Nostr, or somewhere in there, that kind of repeats that, but for the information age, potentially.
I think so as well. I think that's pretty much the path of the revolution.
Wow, this is exciting stuff, man. We've gone into a few different areas, James. We've talked about your Bitcoin prediction market. We've talked a little bit about philosophy and reality. Is there anything else you wanted to share while I've got you?
Well, I feel like one big issue that potentially could be something that subverts Bitcoin is the current power structure of money itself. Whereby, let's say fiat money, people are able to gain easy access to it either through capital markets, through printing it themselves, whatever that may be. And they're able to claim ownership over hash rate of Bitcoin. And if you have a lot of hash rate that's basically compliant in terms of obeying, let's say, sanctions, that could potentially lead to a Bitcoin that is no longer free. And that is a potential threat to Bitcoin. So if there are any listeners who have stayed this far and who are interested in working on something that can protect the future of Bitcoin freedom, I would say looking into incentivizing miner decentralization is something that's incredibly important and incredibly necessary for this free future to continue to exist, because it's very possible to attack Bitcoin. And since mining is more centralized than ever, the attack of, let's say, a feather fork in which people could co-opt pools into censoring the system could be a major blow to the whole revolution. And there's already actors at the highest levels of the state who have been in charge of, let's say, Operation Choke Point 2.0, who are in charge of trying to undermine and subvert the crypto economy through the mechanisms and the levers that they could pull. They're thinking about doing that with Bitcoin, and it's absolutely possible. And the only way to actually prevent that is to resist. The hedge right now, in my view, seeing as the geopolitical kind of game of hash rate, it looks like to be divided between US, China, and then there's a little bit in, let's say, the Czech Republic and Japan. But China is currently, in my view, the hedge on the US sanctions that could potentially subvert Bitcoin. But it's also just a general technical problem that whoever owns that hash rate can potentially do that. And it's a huge problem. And smart people, if they're listening, working on that would keep this revolution in its potential and keep it growing and unfolding in the way that we want it to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I certainly recall you and I and Luke Dasher and a few of these guys from Ocean having a chat when you were over here. And it's really stood out to me. I recently reread The Block Size War, and that whole story is incredibly fascinating. It was like a few people, that you and I know personally, who basically stood up and set the direction. And I think there is a common misconception that the free market spoke, and I don't think that's entirely true. What happened was certain people stood up on a principled position. They set the landscape of options, and then the market followed. And so it does take a first mover to make the first bet or to make the first move. And I think with the hash rate centralization, I mean, that's very clear to me that it's a couple of phone calls away, or one phone call away, and blocks get censored. And more than that, the whole supply chain of the hardware itself. I mean, someone like Bitmain, who is historically and still is an anti-Bitcoin actor, are supplying the majority of hardware. And we don't really have any major contenders coming out that I can see to take that throne. And who knows what could happen, but that's that's a risk that, maybe ASICs are no longer able to be exported from China, or there's some sort of blockade or whatever. Who knows? Maybe we put it to a prediction market to find out. But that seems to me like a major issue, and it's one of the lingering centralized challenges we still have with Bitcoin. So yeah, I agree with your sentiment. If there's smart people out there, putting your energies into thinking about that is really valuable. And there is something more than the monetary value of the blocks themselves and the transaction fees. There's actually the bigger network itself, which if it loses its ability to be uncensorable, it sort of loses a lot of its value proposition potentially.
Yes.
Thank you for indulging me in some of these deeper topics. I know we enjoy going deep into these, but if people want to follow your story as you develop Bitcoin prediction market, James, if they want to see how it evolves, where can they find you?
So I'm on Twitter at Billy Hong Beats. Also, Bitcoin Prediction Market is also on Twitter if they want to follow that. And if they want to just check out Bitcoin Prediction Market, it's bitcoinprediction.market.
Speaking of Billy Hong Beats, just as a final note, James, you did a bit of music production, I hear.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Second year of my college, I was disenfranchised with academic research. I was a mathematical researcher, and I didn't really find it too fascinating how everything was basically top down, and I didn't have the freedom to pursue the topics that I wanted. So I decided to be a music producer and make some beats and turn that into a small business. Generated a little bit of revenue, but then my fascination for business took over the fascination for music, and then I pursued other things in pursuit of trying to make more money.
I understand. You're a fellow creative at heart, and I appreciate that. Bitcoin plus creativity goes together very well. But hey, look, man, I won't hold you up. I do appreciate your time, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you so much, Cody.
Thank you for listening. I do hope you enjoyed the show. I am Cody Ellingham, and that was the transformation of value. If you would like to get in touch, please send me an email at hello@thetransformationofvalue.com, and I will get back to you.